Hello, I'm Olivia Mattis, delighted to welcome you to today's program of the Sousa Mendes Foundation. We were last together in June, a month ago. I've been to Portugal since then. We had a fabulous Educators Institute where we were in residence at the new Aristides de Sousa Mendes Museum. It was quite a program. And we had 17 educators, 16 from the US, one from Portugal, learning about rescue and resistance. If you want to come to Portugal with us next year, we're going to be putting the link into the chat box. If you know a teacher or you are a teacher, we use the term educator broadly construed. We would love to have you. Today, we're focusing on the amazing story of rescue and resistance in Denmark during World War II. It's a unique story in the annals of Holocaust rescue. And I couldn't think of a better panel to have with us today. You're in for a real treat. We will be hearing first from the curator Ellen BARI from the Museum of Jewish Heritage. She has designed an incredible exhibition at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. It's a temporary exhibition up for 5 years. I've never heard of a temporary exhibition being up so long. And it's a tribute to her and to Terkel and Steen, who are also with us, who consulted on the exhibition. It's quite a unique exhibition. It's aimed actually for young people, or people of all ages, let's say. And as Ellen will show you, they use child actors and holograms. I mean, it's an amazing thing. So if you live in New York City, or you're visiting New York, or you know anyone in New York, please send them to this exhibition and go yourself. It's well worth it. After Ellen BARI, we're going to have the privilege of hearing from a survivor, Steen Metz. He was there. He was born in Denmark, and he has a story to tell that's quite moving. His story is different from that of the majority of the Danish Jews who were rescued to Sweden. Steen is one of the few hundred who, in fact, were sent to Theresienstadt. He's going to tell you that story. And we're glad he's here. After Steen, we have the world's expert on rescue and resistance in Denmark during World War II. His name is Terkel Strede. He's joining us from Denmark, right around the corner from where one of the ships, the Goethe III, went and ferried people to Sweden. And I'm so pleased that he's made time in his busy schedule to join us here today. So we'll hear first from Ellen, then from Steen Metz, and then from Terkel Strede. So Ellen BARI, please take it away.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. I am thrilled at the number of people who have joined us today, and truly honored to be speaking here with Terkel and with Steen. As Olivia said, the exhibition was designed for 9 to 12-year-olds, but I really say it's for 9 to 99. And I usually start with an introduction to the story, but I think I'm going to just jump right into the slides, please. Because I imagine many of you have seen the video of Voices in the Void, so you have a little background. This is one of the illustrations that welcomes you into the exhibition. As you notice, the boat in the frame, the Goethe III, is one of the rescue ships that was used at the time, ferrying Jews to safety in Sweden. This particular boat was gifted to the Museum of Jewish Heritage in 1989 by the Danish government. And the young woman standing on the boat with her hand outreached, please, next slide, please, is, I'm going to massacre her name, but it's Henny Sindik-Sundo. And she was actually responsible for the fact that the Goethe III was used in the rescue at the time. We used this quote at the beginning and at the end of the exhibition. It was the right thing to do, so we did it. Simple as that. This is something that we heard from many, many of the rescuers. And as you know, this is quite unusual in the story of Holocaust history. Next slide, please. So this is the entrance to the exhibition. As Olivia said, it is at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. It is on the third floor. It will be there for many years. I would love if each of you can come see it. It is truly much more animated than you can even imagine in the slideshow. Next slide, please. We begin the exhibition with an introduction to the Holocaust, taking into consideration that many of our visitors have no information about the Holocaust. And we thought it was very important that people understand the context within which the rescue took place. In other words, the danger that was at stake and what was going on in Europe at the time. Many people, these are Jewish population figures from 1933. Many of our visitors are surprised to see that there were only about 500,000 Jews in Germany and often wonder how we got to the murder of 6 million if so few lived in Germany at the time. They're surprised by the large number of Jews in Poland, and I just want to point your attention to Denmark is that small island nation just above Germany. Next slide, please. This is a sister map that is literally just across from this one in the gallery, but in one fell swoop, you see that by December of 1941, all of those countries whose populations we were just taking into account are already under Nazi occupation in the bright orange, and the others are living in countries that are Nazi allies. So it becomes very clear how we get to 6 million. Next slide, please. We jump from here to the spring of 1942. We are 2 years into the occupation of Denmark. And as Olivia said, because this was designed for young people, we employed every kind of media, immersive technique, interactive technique, and we've created composite characters that would be age mates to our visitors. And you're about to hear from a 10-year-old boy, Max, who is living in Copenhagen, and in the exhibition would be speaking to you in the fish market.
I'm just gonna wait here, Mom. She's friends with all the vendors, so I could be here a while. Are the German soldiers gone yet? Can you see? They're the really big ones. They've been playing their music over at City Hall. I think it stinks. And it's not like a radio where you can just turn it off. We celebrated my sister's birthday last weekend and had a cake for the first time in ages. My mom said it's because most of the ingredients she needs are being sent to Germany. My sister's slice was normal, but everyone else's was pretty small. Wonder when things will go back to normal? There's a new kid in my class. I go to the Jewish school, and this new kid moved from Austria. He told me that the Germans where he's from would just close the soccer field whenever they felt like it, just because they were Jewish. That's so unfair. That could never happen here, could it? I told my teammates about it. Only a couple of us are Jewish, but we all agreed. If they tried to do anything like that here, we'll all just go play in the park.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in addition to these composite characters, we also have a number of real people who our visitors can follow throughout the exhibition, one of whom is Steve Metz, who you are all extremely lucky to hear from today. And we also feature Henny, who is in the center here, and Bent Melchior, who throughout our exhibition is a 12-year-old boy, David Sampolinsky, who is a true Jewish hero, and Ellen Nielsen, who is a non-Jewish Danish woman who risks everything to save many, many Jews. Next slide, please. We now enter into Gallery 3, where we are now in the summer of 1943. Resistance efforts have increased. They've come to a crescendo. There's what's called the August Uprising. And next slide, please. And I just wanted to draw your attention in particular to this slide. So in the upper left, we see a car being turned over. This is in one of the street riots at the moment, at that time, but below it is a train that was blown off its tracks. This is a sabotage effort on the part of the resistance. a German train. Now, on the right-hand side, however, this is actually a Danish naval vessel that was sunk by its own navy in order to ensure that the Nazis would not get their hands on it. Next slide, please. This gallery is set up like a Copenhagen streetscape. We took great pains to literally mirror not only the shapes of the buildings, but the colors. We brought in special colorists, and this is the experience that you might have at the exhibition. Next slide, please. And the way that the Jews were informed about this is that on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, the rabbi made an announcement in the synagogue alerting the Jews that they needed to go into hiding. This is a diorama of the magnificent synagogue that is as it was 80 years ago when the rescue took place. Next slide, please. As I said, we continue to follow our composite characters. This is Max. He is now packing. He is extremely anxious, and he is literally on the run. Next slide, please. We now enter into a gallery in which we will see a beautiful film where we have voices of the survivors talking about the crossing. But this map is just a quick view of all of those orange spots that you see are locations where Danish Jews would have left Denmark for Sweden. As you see, all of those rescues were by sea. We are talking about every kind of small vessel, from rowboats, kayaks, fishing boats, lighthouse tenders. Next slide, please. This is part of our presentation. This is actually, we have a 73% model of the Goethe 3 in the exhibition, and we project over that. And the next slide, which shows our a very lucky group arriving in Sweden and being greeted by a number of wonderful Swedish neighbors. Next slide. We now enter into a gallery in which we discuss both fates, those who were lucky to get to Sweden and those unfortunate ones who were arrested, informed upon, didn't get the message, who were taken by train, cattle car actually, to Theresienstadt. This is the first time that Danish Jews were subjected to the kind of atrocities that other European Jews had been exposed to already at this point in the war. Next slide, please. In Sweden, the Jews tried to, settle in, make home. They had no idea of when or if they'd ever get back to Denmark. This is Bent Melchior is now in class where they were teaching them in Danish. And even our dear Henny had to flee because of her resistance activities. Next slide, please. This space is a space that is dedicated to Theresienstadt. As you see, this is the first time that any of Denmark's Jews are forced to wear a yellow star. Steen and his family were taken to Theresienstadt. Next slide, please. I won't go into detail because you'll hear directly from Steen, but this is one illustration that were created from a very poignant story he had told us about playing soccer with some boys from Czechoslovakia. He said he learned only many years later that they were deported. One of the things that the Danish leadership continued to do for its Jews is negotiate on their behalf so that none were deported to death camps from Theresienstadt. Next slide, please. And they also negotiated an early release of liberation in April of 45, in which white buses took them out of Theresienstadt even before the end of the war. Next slide, please. The war has ended. There's tremendous joy all over the world and obviously in Denmark. Next slide, please. And this is one of my favorite photographs in the exhibition. As I mentioned, the Jews of Denmark left in the cover of darkness, tiny boats hitting under straw, fish, mats, and they returned during the day on big open ferries to throngs of people cheering. This is unheard of in the history of the Holocaust. Next slide, please. Our final gallery is all about this, the warm welcome that they received upon return. And for the first time, you, our visitors, have a chance to meet each of those beautiful people that we've met as youngins, as adults, as they talk about their experience returning and in the years after the war. Next slide, please. This is just one little snippet. This is Bent Melchior, who did go on to become the chief rabbi of Denmark. His grandson is the chief rabbi of Denmark today. And this was a quote from that film. "I have been a refugee myself. I know what it's about. I know it is a degrading situation. And my entire view on humanity and the world was formed to a great degree by that time on a small boat in the Baltic Sea." Next slide, please. We end on this quote from the Talmud: "To save a life is to save the world." Our amazing illustrator, Sveta Dorosheva, has managed to insert the entire story of the Danish rescue in this one graphic. And that's it. I thank you. I'm sorry that I sped through, but there's a lot here. And now it's my privilege and my honor to pass it over to Steen Metz, who you will get to hear from directly.
Thank you very much, Ellen. It's a marvelous exhibit, and I have seen it several times. And I compliment the museum not only for talking about the people that escaped to Sweden, but also the ones that ended up in Theresienstadt. My family, my father, my mother, and myself were part of the 5% of the Jewish population in Denmark. We were arrested and we were transported to Theresienstadt. Next slide. I was born and raised in Odense. You see the town with a circle around it. And to my knowledge, we had not been warned, alerted about the upcoming arrest. By far, the majority of the Danish Jews at that time and today, they live in and around Copenhagen, and they had been alerted. And I was 8 years old. At the next slide, please. I was 8 years old when we were arrested. And I'm amazed at this picture, because Denmark was occupied. And while Denmark was occupied, I was on vacation with my family, and we had a great time. But back to the Holocaust, and after we were arrested, next slide, please, we were transported into town, the middle of the town. We were assembled in a schoolyard, and we were transported in the truck that you see and this artifacts. On the next slide, can you imagine spending 3.5 days, 3.5 nights in a cattle car? It was completely dark, no lights, no windows. We spent time sitting or standing, alternate, for such a long time. The atmosphere was tense. Being 8 years old, I didn't quite understand what was going on. The smell was getting worse and worse. We didn't have any bathroom facilities, and we had to use buckets in the corner. The Nazis didn't give us anything to eat or drink. Fortunately, some of us had brought snacks and sandwiches, which we shared with everyone in the cattle car. We made one stop, got some fresh air, got some water to drink, and on the next slide, you'll see us arriving in the camp. Theresienstadt is the German version, Tersen would be the Czech version, and the camp was located in was then Czechoslovakia. It is the Czech Republic today. On the next slide, you'll see a loft illustration. My father and my mother spent 18 months in a loft very similar. And it's hard to imagine, but my mother somehow convinced the authorities that I could stay with her the whole time. This did not happen very often. You can see we slept on bunk beds. In the winter, it was very cold. In the summer, it was very hot. And I remember scratching myself, waking up, didn't understand what was going on. until my mother explained to me about fleas, lice. And I need to tell you that anybody in the camp, 16 years or older, had to work. My father was an attorney, and he was used to litigating in the courthouse. He was used to working in an office, and suddenly he was exposed to some very heavy road work beginning of the winter. He had low energy because we got very little food to eat. So it was hard for my father. On top of that, we heard from a young man in the same work group that my father was kicked and whipped when he didn't produce what the Nazis expected, very arbitrary goal. He couldn't handle it. He ended up in the infirmary, spent a couple of months there, and passed away at the young age of 40. He'd been married to my mother for less than 10 years. He'd clearly died from hunger. My mother also had to work. She worked long hours, had many different jobs. One was to work in a factory with a metal called mica. I want to talk about, and unfortunately it's not going to take very long, about the food that we received. We stood in line for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, up to 40 minutes. This is particular illustration is lining up at lunch with our bowl and spoon. We got potato soup, at least they called it potato soup, every single day. Potato peel, potato skin, and boiled water. At breakfast, we got substitute coffee and about half a loaf of bread that we had to share within the family. At least at dinner, there was some variety. We got of soups, I remember beef, barley, and once a week we got a special German pasta dish, and that was supposed to be a special treat. How were we able to survive on those meager portions? About 35,000 inmates out of 140,000 didn't make it. They died just like my father from hunger. I believe the only reason I'm able to share my experiences today is the fact that all nations started getting packages from their homeland. Denmark and Sweden, we got packages about once a month, consisting of clothing, food, and vitamins. So one day, my mother is opening a package. It's very heavy. She looks inside. None of the good stuff. But can you imagine a guard had replaced the food with 2 bricks? That's why it was so heavy. I can never understand how one human being can treat another human being that way. I want to relate to you. At this time, I was 9 years old and outgrown my shoes. No stores where my mother could buy any shoes for her 9-year-old boy. She bartered, and I'm sure she was good at it, with a Czech lady. The Czech lady got some Danish food, and my mother got some used shoes, and I was able to wear them the rest of the time. I want to talk a little bit about, Ellen mentioned it, that I played soccer. And I played soccer with some Czech children, and I had a particular friendship with them. I was able to speak their language. I was able to understand their language. And for a brief moment, I almost, with emphasis on the word, almost forgot where I was in prison. So one day, next slide, please. So one day, the Czech children didn't show up. It wasn't until later on I found out that they had been transported in cattle cars to extermination camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau. 85,000 in total were sent to Birkenau, Auschwitz. I want to, if I may have the next slide, please. I refer to this slide as happiness returns. It was a miracle. We were saved by the Swedish buses, driven by Danish and Swedish drivers. It was a miracle they were able to drive from Sweden all the way down to Czechoslovakia. It was a miracle that they were able to get permission to ship us, to transport us back. We had to stop a couple of times because of a heavy bombardment, but eventually we reached Sweden. We were not allowed to stay in Denmark. In Sweden, we were in quarantine for about 8 days. And then afterwards, we reconnected with my family. My entire family lived in the area around Copenhagen, and it was wonderful to see them again. A few weeks later, on the next slide, I'm showing the Danish flag. The Danes were celebrating as never before. Germany had finally surrendered. We tried to celebrate in Sweden, but I have to tell you, I didn't really feel like a free person until I returned to Denmark. My mother and I had a difficult time, especially in the beginning, because my father was not around anymore. And we had no apartment. Our apartment had been rented out. We had nowhere to stay. But I cannot tell you what kind of welcome we got from everybody, friends, my school. And without that, it would have been very difficult to transition to regular life again. I got back to my old school friends, and eventually I graduated from high school. Then I graduated from commercial college. And later on, I wanted to see part of the world, and I went to England with a Danish food company, then Canada, and eventually United States. I've been here since 1962. I retired in 1999. And if I may have the next slide, please. It's showing a cover of my book, A Danish Boy in Theresienstadt. It was published in 2012, and like a lot of other survivors and liberators, my family didn't talk much about the Holocaust, but it all changed when the book came out. And today I cannot talk enough about it, and it's my passion to talk to students in other venues. I want to finish here, and I want to introduce you to a countryman, Terkel Stræde.
Yes, thank you, Sten, for your powerful statement. Mange tak. It's called in Danish. The voice of the survivor is so much stronger than that of the scholar, but that of the scholar is all that I have to offer. Let me start with a quote. Helpers and rescuers during Nazism occur in very different shapes and with the most different motives. They come from all layers of society, have the most diverse political and religious opinions. They are women and men acting alone as couples or within the framework of larger networks. They have in common that they see a room for action where others don't. Helpers and rescuers did not pretend to be heroes, just ordinary people who acted in the conviction that they were doing something natural and morally necessary. These words of German historian Wolfram Wette apply perfectly to the Danish rescue of October 1943, when 7,600 Jews were taken from German-occupied Denmark to neutral Sweden and 470 deported to the ghetto of Theresienstadt. Ordinary Danes from all walks of life engaged in the clandestine sea lift operation, the speed of which guaranteed its remarkable success. Ambivalence in the German leadership in Denmark between eliminationist anti-Semitism and the wish to please Denmark's government, administration, and the Danish people created a window of opportunity through which the Jews could slip out, helped by their own agency and that of thousands of others. The occupation was less hard on the Danes than on most European populations, and Germany issued guarantees for Denmark's territorial integrity, sovereignty, and neutrality in the war. The Danes, considered an Aryan people, should be sweet-talked into integrating into the greater Nazi empire, and Danish agriculture and industry made to contribute to Germany's war economy. German decision makers met only rejection when they brought up the so-called Jewish question. The Danish government and civil society would accept no racial laws. But on August 29, 1943, however, the Danish democratic government, having lost much popular support to the resistance, stopped functioning, and immediately the Germans decided to deport the Jews, a punishment by proxy of the Danes for abandoning the policy of cooperation that had served the Germans so well. Now, German Reich plenipotentiary SS General Werner Best expected to rule Denmark by his iron fist from then on, but soon the heads of Danish central administration, with the blessing of the democratic parties, agreed to form an unpolitical sort of government and continue the policy of cooperation. By then, Best had received Hitler's go-ahead already and could not call off the Judenaktion. But future cooperation with the Danish administration and business being more important, Best had a secret agent convey a warning to leading socialist politicians. In 3 days, the Jews will be deported. The warning was passed on to Jewish leaders, and most Jews acted with resolution. They left their homes within hours, found shelter with non-Jews, and made their way to harbors and fishermen's villages on Denmark's eastern coast, close to Sweden. The Jews quickly had to arrange for their property and businesses to be taken care of and to collect money to pay for the illegal crossing. In some cases, large sums were needed to convince fishermen to risk their boats and livelihood. The Susa Mendes Foundation focuses on the rescue of Jews, which in many cases was a very lonely affair for the individuals who decided to help. Not in Denmark. Wide parts of society joined in a collective effort to help the Jews escape. To care for the weak and needy was a widely shared value, and the protection of minorities was seen as crucial to the democratic order. This value system, resulting from a historical compromise between farmers' liberalism and workers' moderate socialism, was shared by most Danes, and their training in grassroots democracy in the farmers' and workers' movements was essential to their capacity for efficient action. I'm just completing a book these days on the rescuers of October 43, and my research confirms the findings of Wolfram Wetter, the diversity of rescuers and their motives, the mundanity of the helpers in the helpers' own eyes of what they did, a self-understanding far from the extraordinary and heroic. Helpers spanned networks of rescue over Copenhagen and eastern Denmark, where most Jews lived, and made sure Jews in the provinces were reached too. Let me briefly highlight some important help networks. Flight is about mobility, and at the bottlenecks of the October 43 rescue operation, we find rescue personnel, taxi and truck drivers, as private motoring had been forbidden because of lack of fuel, and leisure boating too. And we find fishermen helping out of pity for the persecuted or out of greed. Further actors in the complex clandestine rescue operation were labor leaders and activists. The Social Democratic Party had 50% of voters in Denmark, and Danish enterprises were thoroughly unionized. Labor leaders received the first warning of the German Judenaktion, and labor activists spread the word and took care of those Jews who despaired at the menace by deportation and death. Physicians, nurses, and other healthcare professionals massively engaged themselves in help for the Jews, turning Copenhagen hospitals into hubs and logistic centers of the rescue operation. Lutheran clergymen and laypeople sheltered Jews, helped them reach the shores, and find transportation to Sweden. The Grundtvigian majority of the Lutheran State Church of Denmark was not anti-Semitic, but positive towards the Jews. And a so-called shepherd's letter by the Bishop of Copenhagen protesting strongly against the persecution of Jews was read out in all Danish churches, motivating community members to assist Jews wherever they could. The Danish resistance was still in the making and did not take part in the rescue activities as such, but some groups and individual resistance fighters did, and many helpers of Jews later found their way into the armed resistance. Informal groups of friends, colleagues, and family members of Jews played the major part. Ove Bertelsen's 1947 book made the Lyngby Group, named after a location north of Copenhagen, the most famous, but there were many such spontaneously organized rescue groups. In a few cases, like in Gilleleje, local citizens founded help committees that did a great job in sheltering, feeding, and comforting the Jewish refugees. By negotiating with the fishermen, the committees managed to substantially reduce the prices for transportation and make sure no one who couldn't pay was left behind. What motivated the rescuers to go out of their ways and subject themselves to unknown risks? Stereotype assumption about a Danish national character won't get us far. A diversity of helpers, groups, and milieus participated out of different values and motives. Nationalistic anti-Germanness was strong during the Nazi occupation of Denmark, and to its supporters, helping Jews was a way of striking a blow against the Germans. Christian ethics of mercy, since the dominant Grundtvigian interpretation of Lutherdom was philo-Semitic, not anti-Semitic, anti-Semitism was weaker in Denmark than in Germany, Sweden, and most other countries. Socialist ethics of solidarity were important to many helpers during October 43, and I have already mentioned the professional ethics of healthcare and rescue personnel. Harriet Birkebæk, married to the teacher Kuno Birkebæk, one of the members of the Gilleleje Citizens Committee, summed up the everyday of the rescue days in these words, and I quote, "I will never forget those days. Our home was simply filled with these unhappy persecuted people. Many wept, others tried to keep up their courage. All were hungry, so it was important to keep a cool head, act, and help with everything one could." Never to forget, when we're talking about the widely successful Danish rescue of October 43, 470 Jews from Denmark were deported to Theresienstadt and spent 1.5 years in the ghetto under miserable conditions. 53 of them died in the ghetto, one of them, as you heard, being the father of Sten Metz. I'm so happy Sten was able to share his powerful story with us, and I'm grateful to the Susa Mendes Foundation for putting together this wonderful program, and to all of you who participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Terkel. All right, so now I'm going to make announcements for just a few minutes. It's a perfect opportunity for you to be formulating and putting those questions into our chat box. I want to tell you about what we have upcoming in the month of August here at the Susa Mendes Foundation. So, on August 17th, which is a Sunday, of course, we do everything on Sundays, we are having a book launch for this very important book, Cartoonists Against Racism, The Secret Jewish War on Bigotry. And it's about how the American Jewish Committee sort of clandestinely hired cartoonists to do well, to counteract the rise of the German-American Bund and all kinds of right-wing propaganda with cartoons that made the U.S. public favorable to American Jews and tried to, mitigate anti-Semitism. It's kind of a shocking but fascinating story. The book itself is it's chock full of these cartoons. You can probably see, and many in color. It's a great gift, or maybe you want to order it for yourself. So we're having a book launch with Raphael Medoff, who wrote the book, and he'll be in dialogue with cartoonist Jordan Gorfinkel. And it'll be a very fun program. It'll be free, just like today. And I hope you will sign up. Now I'm going to tell you about our other program in August, which is 1 week following on August 24th. We're turning our attention to the dramatic and little-known story of women's resistance at Auschwitz. There was the Sonderkommando revolt of 1944. Women played a crucial role in smuggling gunpowder that resulted in the blowing up of crematorium number 4 at Auschwitz. There's an amazing new film. It's called Sabotage. We're going to show it to you in August. And right now we're going to see a little trailer of that film.
Sabotage, Sabotage! Das ist ein Verbrechen gegen das Deutsche Reich. Ein Akt der Sabotage und dafür gibt es nur eine Strafe.
Anastasia!
We kind of knew that we're not going to survive. Therefore, we're going to make our days count. When the reality becomes too painful, we have the support of each other. The reality didn't matter. You either tell yourself that you're going to die with dignity, or that you are going to survive at any cost. We have gunpowder. Can you use it? Let's try. What can happen? We're not going to come alive anyway. What the heck? We are not going to the crematorium alive. It was all very secret. Very secret. If it was dangerous, it was. We were terrified of the consequences, but not terrified enough not to do it.
So that is our trailer for the film Sabotage. The program is called Women's Resistance at Auschwitz, and that will be on August 24th. So I hope you will sign up for those August programs and the programs to come. So now let's get to your questions. So there are a few questions about the King of Denmark. There is sort of the myth that he wore the yellow star like the Danish Jews. The Danish Jews didn't wear the yellow star, nor did he. Right. So can somebody talk about that myth and how it got a foothold and what the real story was?
Oh, I'd be happy
Go ahead.
to start. People thought that we wore Jewish stars, as you said earlier, but this was not the case. And it was a myth, and there are some other myths about the king. Unfortunately, and I cannot remember the book, but I read in a book that he wore the yellow star. But it was a wonderful story. Can you imagine if we had to wear stars and then the king would wear the stars, David's star as well? Thank you.
But in fact, he didn't wear it, and the Jews of Denmark didn't wear it until you and the other Jews who were sent to Theresienstadt wore it there, correct?
That's correct.
So we just want to put that myth to bed. So there are a number of questions about how come Denmark was so different from the rest of Scandinavia, the rest of Europe. Why was it so different?
Let's have Turkel answer that.
Well, that could be a very complicated issue. Let me try to make it brief. Denmark was the only occupied country that was allowed to keep its territorial sovereignty and keep the government that was a socialist-led government under Nazi rule. Imagine that. And because the Germans said, we are basically not your enemies, we just come to protect you against the evil British, and you can just go on. And this made, of course, produced a kind of a maneuvering space for the Danish authorities and Danish politicians to try to cling on to as much as sovereignty as possible. And one of the very few issues that was not negotiable to the Danish government was exactly the issue of racial laws. So, but why did they stand so firm on that particular issue? That has very much to do with the Danish concept of democracy, which again has to do with the Grundtvigian interpretation of Lutheranism, which is different from the Lutheranism in Norway and Sweden. The Danish interpretation is a very liberal one, based really on the success that Danish society had in exploiting the liberal order of trade in the world, the experience that liberal values matter and liberal values will do us good. And part of these liberal values would also be that you would accept not only the majority, but also the minority. There is a saying by Grundtvig himself, the founder of that branch of Lutheranism, freedom for Loke as well as for Thor. Thor was the god of one of the leading gods of the Norse universe, and Loke was the one who was the traitor. So it actually tells you that you have to also provide rights to the person that does not fit into the values of majority society. And that particular, I think that particular mindset was very important and different from Norway and Sweden.
So Steen and Ellen, you want to add anything to that?
I think Turkel covered it.
I think what's important also to know that the Danish Jews were integrated into the society. There weren't any specific neighborhood where the Jewish people started. And I think it all comes back to culture, but I think Turkel did a great job in explaining it.
Ellen, you wanted to add something?
No, that's fine. Let's
Okay.
I would just like to add that, of course, you're right, Steen, about the integration of, say, a major part of the Danish population, but 1,500 out of the 7,000 to 8,000 Jews who lived in Denmark were refugees from Nazi Germany's German speakers. Were by no means integrated into Danish society, and there was done no difference from the side of the rescuers or from the side of the Danish authorities between these people who were not even Danish citizens and those who were well integrated, long-time families that had lived for a long time in Denmark.
Now, you mentioned the Bishop of Copenhagen's shepherd's letter, which seems like a very important moment in this whole operation. Can you tell us more about that letter? When was it sent and what did it say?
It was sent on the Sunday, the 3rd of October. That is on the second day of the German police action against the Jews. And it was sent to every church in Denmark. I mean, the Bishop of Copenhagen did not actually have the powers of an archbishop of something, but he sent it to every single priest in the country, and they all decided to read it out, except for like 20 of them who were Nazis. What was in it? The major thing, a protest against all kinds of racial bigotry and against the ongoing persecution, and also the saying that there are situations where a Lutheran will have to obey not to the lawful authorities of his country, but to the laws of God directly. And this is what applies to the present situation, was his words. And it was very powerful to have it read out, especially on that particular Sunday, because it was a Sunday of confirmation in many in many churches, meaning that they were usually the churches are quite empty, but on confirmation Sundays they are full of people who come there to see the young people confirm the Christian faith. And that was one of these days. So many people got the message from the bishop.
Wonderful. So there's a question about Danish education today. And so to what extent is this amazing story taught in Danish schools today? And is it an ongoing point of Danish pride today?
I can just pick up from Turco can obviously speak to this more broadly, but from my experience, it is not well known. It is not well taught. My interactions with some Danish teenagers, who came to the exhibit, they were thrilled. They were surprised. They were, it was a surprise to them at how much we had celebrated the Danes. It is not in the Danish character to boast. And so that was also part of the lack of talking about and sharing about what had been done during the rescue. But to my experience, it is not a story that is well shared. Turco, would you say
Yeah,
something?
since a few years, it has become a part that must be taught in Danish schools. Danish teachers are very reluctant to accept any kind of, you can say, government ideas of what they should do. They want to teach like the stuff that they want to teach and they consider important. But since 3 or 4 years, it has now become mandatory in folk schools as well as in high school, as well as in vocational schools, to teach the Holocaust. And the Holocaust, of course, being all what happened in Europe in general, but also the Danish situation, because the exception, Denmark was an exception from what happened. The exception can also throw light on the general picture.
And wasn't one of the exceptional parts of the story the warm welcome and the fact that the Danes who came back, they found their apartments intact? I mean, my own family from Belgium came back after the war. The apartment was completely empty. We found out the name of the Gestapo officer who had lived there and the date when everything was shipped to Berlin. That was the common practice across Europe, but not in Denmark, right?
This is true, but as far as our family was concerned, our apartment had been rented out, as I mentioned earlier. We didn't have anywhere to stay. But in general, the apartment and the houses were maintained by friends. It was maintained by the government. And then you hear stories from Poland, as an example, where other people had gone into the houses, into the apartment, and taken various stuff. So there's a big contrast between Denmark and the other occupied countries.
Amazing. Let's get to our final comments. So, Terkel, what would you like to say today in closing to our audience?
Well, two things actually. One thing is, of course, that the way the world looks today, it is really important to focus on the people who chose to do good in a situation where it could have cost them a lot of money. It could possibly have cost them their lives. It wasn't that dangerous in Denmark as they thought, but at the time when they decided to help, there was just the introduction by the Germans of death penalty for acts of sabotage. So that kind of courage is needed in many spots and in many situations today. That's one thing. And the other thing is that completely different. I saw in the chat that there were some questions about personal stories, people who have relatives who have come across to Sweden, have been refugees in Sweden, and there are sources that are easily accessible to find out these things. And if you just write me an email, I'll be happy to provide you with the links to it. And may I ask one last thing? I'd like to greet Arne Rabuchin, who has joined us from Israel, who is a child survivor of the Danish rescue. He was in his mother's belly as they crossed the Öresund and was born in Sweden shortly after arriving. And he is in our audience today. Happy
That's
to meet you,
wonderful.
Arne.
Not born on the boat, but born on arrival.
Yes.
Okay. Steen, please, what would you like to say in your lifetime of experience and your amazing personal story, so harrowing, but amazing that you have this beautiful spirit and the most beautiful smile I've ever seen. So, what do you want to say today in closing to our
Thank you,
audience?
Olivia. First of all, thank you for having this program. As we have seen, a tremendous interest, a record number of people watching. I want to talk about the future. Whenever I speak to schools or other venues, I ask each person in the audience, talk to at least 4 people, tell them, yes, there was a Holocaust. And why is that important today? Because of the increase in vandalism, increase in anti-Semitism, and even Holocaust denial. So it's important, especially since the survivors are not going to be around forever, that we carry on the message.
Okay. Now, Ellen, there was a question in the chat for you I didn't get a chance to ask, so I'll ask it now, which is, what inspired you to do this for young people? I mean, that's so necessary, but what was the motivating factor for you? And what would you like to say in closing?
So it was really the Museum of Jewish Heritage that decided that it was time to create an exhibition for children, and the Danish rescue was a perfect opportunity to be able to talk to young people, to potentially empower young people to know right from wrong, to make moral choices. Our kids are they see around them, even in the playground, they are making moral choices all the time. This story from the Holocaust, this story of the Danish rescue, is an amazing story of neighbors helping neighbors. And so specifically for young people, it's a positive story for them to take with them, to feel empowered, to do the same. And I will say, while we were developing it, this is what we had in mind. But since October 7th, it has also been very important that this particular exhibit reminds all of us, young and old, that there are always good people everywhere who will do the right thing and who are doing the right thing. And so for our young people, it is for them to step up and be those people who can change the world. And the Danish rescue story was just, I felt that it was a gift to me to be able to share this incredible message.
Someone's asking, where's the museum? It's the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York City in Battery Park. Go there, every single one of you. So thanks to our amazing speakers, thanks to our large, great audience. If you like what we do, there'll be a donate button on the link on the thank you note that you're about to get. Please join us in August and see you then. Enjoy the rest of July and see you August 17th. Be well, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.